surgery, which is, did I remember to do something? And I'm going to assert to you now that most of us actually work in the operating rooms, these super high-risk environments. Notice the compression. So we frequently get the guy on the ground at Vanderbilt with 15 minutes notice off the elevator and no medical history. So anyway, going back to the divided attention and people bringing the same sort of attention to detail and diligence to healthcare as they bring to getting out of the house in the morning, I'll share with you that I got here today without my ID. And it's quite likely that when I get to work on Tuesday morning to anesthetize my patients, something will go wrong because I'm cavalier and forgetful and I'm human. And yet, I would assert that most of us in academic medical care are actually pretty diligent, pretty high-performing individuals, but we still forget to do things. And this is I think, a common problem. And then we have this. The density in the very top there isn't meant to be there, okay? This is a transesophageal echocardiogram of the heart of a person who was having an operation, and they were actually on their side, where it's really difficult to do CPR. When I came into the room...
So, Ray, do you know where the perfusionist room is?
Yes. The perfusionist do the heart-lung bypass.
We're going to need a perfusionist here? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Great. Tell them Dr. Eagle says so, okay?
Dr. Eagle, by the way, is large and in charge in this room, okay? She is a rock star. Now, we were just doing a nice operation. In fact, the guy who was running this room came by to tell me and a buddy who were sitting in the break room that everything was cool. He was just having to give some blood. And could we listen out for his other room? And 90 seconds later, somebody went running down the hall, and that was an cue for us, you know, we should better go to this room. And when I walked in, they were trying to do chest compressions on a guy who was on his side. So they had one person like with their hip against, and the other person going like this. And when we got him on his back, he developed his circulation again. And when the cardiac surgeons and the perfusionists finished up about an hour later, they extracted that large foreign body from his pulmonary circulation where it had been acting as a cork, like a cork in a wine bottle, impeding the flow of blood through the lungs and then into the left side of the heart where it could be pumped out to the rest of the body. So these are the kinds of things that happen in the operating room. And these are the moments of terror that punctuate the hours and hours of boredom that lead to most of us forgetting to do things like bringing our IDs to work or remembering to give antibiotics or all the other hundreds of routine things that we need to do to prevent the unnecessary creation of excitement in the operating room. So we face in anesthesiology and in all these high criticality environments in medicine, that would include critical care, the operating room, and all the procedural areas, a problem of getting information to the clinician. Most of the very best electronic health information systems still are data repositories that are pretty much, in my mind, like making libraries by throwing books into a dumpster. And the clinician has to be diligent enough to want to search, need to actually have enough of a cognitive framework of what they're about to do to know that they need to search for information. And I'm going to assert that to really improve healthcare, we need to move up the slope of information value to the point that we get all the way down on this list to what I would call automated process monitoring and process control, where we are monitoring the process using machine systems in the background so thoroughly that we can actually know that somebody is about to need to know something and push that information to them in a way that they can't ignore. And usually about the best you can do when you look into a high-performing hospital is that an institution has managed to create transparency in the sense that they no longer require clinicians to search for most of the information, although they still need to realize that they need to go looking for information that isn't visible to them. And this is an example of transparency in the control room at our hospital, where an anesthesiologist or a nurse can basically look up at the board there and say, I need an empty room, there's one, and put a patient into it. And that's actually very useful transparency that takes hospitals 5 to 10 years to create to solve one problem because of the regulatory process. But what I'm going to assert is that we really need augmented vigilance. We need to not only know that there's about to be a problem, but then we need to actually push that information to the right person at the right time using the right modality meaning we need to be able to take this and push it out to me, who's actually pushing a patient from an ICU to an operating room. And this is actually a rolling ICU. This patient's getting vasopressor infusions. They have a pulmonary artery catheter in. They're being bag ventilated by me as I push this patient down the hallway. And they're actually on an operating room table right now. This, by the way, is a pretty cool way to transport patients. So we're coming into the operating room, and you can see the trash bags in the hall from the previous case. It's a bit of a hurry. And I need to get information about this patient that I can use and process while I'm moving. I just wanted to show off a little bit here because this was the operating room of the future at MGH. And you're going to see that as soon as I make the monitor connection there, bang, that patient's ready for surgery. You can't do that in a typical operating room in the world. And I'm sad to say that the MGH has actually shut this project down. But at Vanderbilt, we have actually solved a big piece of this last mile problem, getting mobile information to the clinician. Thank you, Steve Jobs, who created a nice closed environment for us using the iPhone that we can develop for and be confident that the iPhone is going to work just like it did last month. And we can actually send really useful information to anesthesiologists without them having to search. These were my 4 rooms on the day I took this screenshot. That room's empty, that room's in induction, that room's in surgery, and that room's emerged. Okay? I was actually in that room doing the induction. So I can know what I need to know, and I can actually push information to myself using this application. So that patient's heart rate is higher than I wanted it to be. And if I need to now, I can actually call into the room right from my phone from wherever I am to ask what's going on there. Do you need me? And if I really need to look, I can actually see on the video. But we've actually been able to create augmented vigilance. It's great, okay? But I still need to know to look, or I need to know how to process that little alert. And the little alert is not really getting us to the point of being able to tell me I'm about to have a problem, okay? What we need to create actually is an engine that allows us to write our own algorithms quickly to do automated process monitoring and process control for larger parts of the system. And we're not there yet, I'll tell you that right now, but I want to give you one example of what that means, okay? And it's basically, it's a plan to actual comparison. And I will also say, before you all get worried about Big Brother telling us how to practice medicine, that when you see exceptions in the plan to actual progress, that's either somebody who needs attention because they're not actually practicing the way we want them to, or they need attention because they're smarter than we are, okay? So it's actually a learning opportunity either way. So I'm going to give a clinical example of a last mile problem and an automated process monitoring and process control problem that we solved and published that I think has relevance to anesthesiologists who are facing that gunshots problem. So I have to show you some stuff in the medical record here. This is my case. This is a very brief anesthetic for a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. This is the pre-induction blood pressure. Then I induce an anesthetic, and you can tell because the heart rate went up when I intubated the patient, and the heart rate falls down a little bit, and there's this huge gap here in between this first blood pressure and the next blood pressure that was taken, and there's no information there, and of course I was intubating the patient. I'm going to show you a video of that in a minute, so I was not aware of that. But we know that because the heart rate went up, something must have happened to the blood pressure, but we have no idea what that was. Okay? Now that first TE echo video I showed you was of a patient who had no blood pressure, and we were all resuscitating them because we were worried that after too many minutes of no blood pressure, there would be no brain activity. Okay, so if you need to take something away from medicine, especially high criticality medicine, blood pressure equals brain survival. Okay, and there's like a relationship: no blood pressure, no brain survival. So we should care about blood pressure. All right, here's another one. This again is my case. I'll tell you now, this patient survived. That's the pre-induction blood pressure. That's the first blood pressure after induction. That's a 13-minute gap with no blood pressure measurement. This, again, is basically an error of omission, and just forgot to engage the automatic cycling feature of the blood pressure cuff. And that next blood pressure that comes back is 47/32. That might be okay for a neonate. That's not okay for a 77-year-old man. And I can tell you that there were physiologic consequences of that. That is the oxygen saturation there, which should be 100% all the way across. And when the arterial oxygen saturation starts to decline in a patient who's not being ventilated, that means that there's just no cardiac output to deliver oxygenated blood to the fingertips where we measure it. Okay, so this patient did actually take a hit. So this, I have to tell you, is a depressingly common event. And in fact, we studied this at 3 institutions, 3 top-drawer academic institutions. Mass General, the University of Michigan, and Thomas Jefferson University. All level 1 trauma centers, high-quality academic medical centers. What we did, all 3 of them had an anesthesia information management system implemented so we could record this data automatically. We basically instituted no blood pressure recording alerts. And we actually set a pretty lax limit. We think that you should know the pressure every 5 minutes or so during routine anesthesia, so a 10-minute gap would be too long. And one of the institutions served as a control, and we did a before and after design. We basically looked at...
Quick question, Warren. So what happens if, what's the worst, like, give us a range of what would happen if the blood pressure was not recorded and if it went down in a way you wouldn't have expected? Like, would they die?
Yes.
Would they...
2 or 3 more 5-minute intervals with that blood pressure, that patient would have died. Okay? Yeah, that was... So this was me. We finished induction. I looked, I was like, holy crap, there's no data there. Okay? I think, no, they don't drug administration. I'm guessing that there was probably an ephedrine or some kind of vasopressor administration here, because the first thing that happens when you try to cycle the blood pressure cuff after a normal pressure there, it doesn't get anything, it cycles again. And anesthesiologists know when they hear the blood pressure cuff cycled again with no data, it's either way too high or way too low. And given what we were doing, we just induced an anesthetic, you would treat way too low with no data. Okay? All right. So, yeah, these are what we call near misses, okay? And near misses can be hits without much more effort. Okay, so here is the bottom line. We start sending alerts to people, and at one institution, we were able to achieve a statistically significant and meaningful, although not complete, elimination of these gaps, okay? So at institution A, 1.5% of all cases had a gap in blood pressure measurement of more than 10 minutes, somewhere in the middle of the case, between the start of surgery, not even these induction problems, and the end of surgery, okay? Institution B had a higher incidence of these gaps, and they were unable to accomplish a reduction. Okay? Now, most of us, when we think about sending an alert to somebody, and you're using a computer system for documentation and alert mediation, you're thinking, well, we'll show them a pop-up, right? Okay? But at one of the institutions, Institution A, we actually sent them a page. Okay? So somebody yesterday said that we had these sort of quasi-aversive relationships with our pagers. That was you. Yeah, I was an intern. I hated my pager, okay? And still to this day, when your pager goes off as a physician, you get this sort of, like, you see people literally bend over to cover the site of injury when their pager goes. They're running on their hips. Getting a page is an aversive stimulus, okay? And we've actually shown in other work that we can actually we can train people to avoid making errors by paging them. So in fact, Institution A sent pagers. And of course, if you're not going to see this gap, then you're not going to see the pop-up, right? So the notification route matters, okay? We did send them a pop-up, but you really need to send them a page. All right? So we actually have shown that we can, on the minutes time scale, mediate something like monitoring errors, okay? And I will tell you, these errors are depressingly common. And I would, as a philosophical approach to healthcare and improvement in healthcare, you have to take your worst assessment of human performance and decrement it by a power of 10. And that's about probably what you're going to be dealing with in healthcare. That's where you have to start to improve from. Okay? So, I'll give you an example of that. Okay? This is data from an institution that I know of. And this is the frequency of monitoring of blood glucose during surgery as a function of the duration of surgery. So 1 to 2 hour operations, 1 to 2 hour operations, 2 to 3 hour operations, 3 to 4 hour operations. Monitoring of blood glucose during surgery of diabetic patients who are receiving insulin. Okay? So we are giving them insulin and making things happen to their blood glucose. Insulin makes it go down. And you can see that for these operations, a whopping 40% or 60% of patients are actually having their blood glucose monitored. All right? So we created an alert system, and we had a pretty good functional outcome. Okay? And that is that if you look at the number of patients who enter the recovery room now with a blood glucose that is higher than you'd want, above 250, or this is the bad thing, below 65, we managed to get rid of that, okay, with this alert system. So this is not rocket science, okay? We can start and make huge improvements in the quality of healthcare at top-drawer academic medical centers that train the leaders in anesthesiology and medicine by reminding them, hey man, put your ID on before you walk out of the hotel room, okay? It does not have to be that hard. And in most instances, you can lock this in by providing the institution with a direct financial incentive that goes straight to the bottom line. Not through the high-tech and meaningful use compliance business, but by, in fact, providing financial decision support. Anesthesia documentation requires that you have a lot of things documented in the right order to get paid. And if you don't document it, then you don't get paid. So in this instance, the D time is actually it's just the time you had to record to be able to generate a clean bill. And we actually made a system. This was the system that actually inspired me to think about this. This was made by the hospital finance department to send notifications to anesthesiologists in real time. And they spent $180,000 to develop this. And they spent about half of a low-level FTE a year to maintain it. And based on that institution's case volume, contract rates, and performance improvements that they achieved, the annual revenue stream from that was $400,000 a year. And nobody's going to take that out, right? Because it's generating up to $500,000 a year for the institution. And now you can use this same conduit to provide medical decision support, or medical, in this case, automated process monitoring and process control. So that's the space that we're playing in at Vanderbilt, at MGH, at Thomas Jefferson, and at the University of Michigan. There are a few institutions around the country that have enough control over their own EHRs that they're able to bring this kind of clinically implemented, or at least implementable, process improvement to bear in an environment where the time frame and the criticality is that compressed. So as I was preparing to come out here, I was beginning to think about this a little bit and wondering, why are we not able to do more sophisticated decision support and more sophisticated process monitoring and process control in operating rooms? Why are we actually playing down in the low zone? And so if you think about it, really, when you talk about medical decision support, we have complexity of the information we're trying to deal with. And the higher levels of complexity, or the more noise in the data, the more difficult it is to process, and the more difficult it is to come up with a clean recommendation. And then, as decision risk, that is, how important it is to get it right, increases, that actually, it actually raises the complexity and the difficulty of the problem. So if you think about it right now, we do a lot of medical decision-making or decision support using machine systems where we may be able to deal with high complexity information, but you really wouldn't want to actually have too much decision risk involved there. Or we can actually move out the decision risk axis, but then we actually need the information to be pretty precise, okay? So the blood pressure measurement, for example, okay, that was basically blood pressure, there's no argument about it. If it's not there, that's a problem. So that's low inherent complexity, and the decision risk of getting it wrong, like not sending a notification, was pretty high. And so right now, most medical decision systems actually sort of play underneath this curve that I drew here. But then if you add in the operating room or the procedural area where there's also incredible temporal pressure, where you may actually only have a couple of minutes to make a call and then send that information out to the clinician. You've got to get past the last mile, and you've got to make it reach out and touch them. So that actually adds another axis of complexity and difficulty. And so if the information complexity is high, then you really can't tolerate much temporal pressure. So you need, half a day or a day to make the call. So, for example, CPATH, the computerized pathology application. Well, okay, you're actually, the specimen that you're analyzing is dead. It was removed from the patient. And whether you make the diagnosis today or tomorrow doesn't really matter in the course of the evolution of breast cancer. But if we took till tomorrow to make a decision and then send somebody a notification in the anesthesia world, that patient would be dead. Or if we have a lot of decision risk, we still can't tolerate much temporal pressure. And where we would like to go in anesthesia is out the temporal pressure axis so that we can deal with a lot of temporal pressure. But that really, at the moment, restricts us to things that have low decision risk and low inherent information complexity. It's really looking at single parameter alerts. The patient's hypertensive. It's time to bring the next patient into the operating room. You need to give the antibiotics in the next minute or two, or the surgeon's going to make an incision and they won't have the antibiotics on board. So right now, we're in perioperative informatics, sort of playing down along one of these axes. You can have two, but not three of these axes of complexity. But we would like to get here, and ultimately, we would like to get way out here where we can deal with high levels of complexity, high levels of temporal pressure, and high levels of decision risk. All right?
Is the radii of the sphere?
It's just meant to convey some three-dimensionality. So, Dr. Eagle shouldn't have to ask if one of the people in the room knows where their perfusionists hang out. We should be able to know that Dr. Eagle is someplace where she doesn't belong, using a device that really shouldn't need to be in that room, and the perfusionist should just know that they need to come. Okay? Now, I'm going to change subjects here a little bit and talk a little about ergonomics. Ergonomics do matter in the healthcare environment, and we haven't talked about it today, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit. And because we have to address something called latency. So if you have a decision support system that is querying the information system every 10 minutes or so, then really you can only update your decision support system every 10 minutes or every minute, depending on how much temporal pressure you're trying to deal with. And so you have a query interval of 10 minutes, and if you actually have an event that happened before the next decision support query runs, but you don't document it into the aims until after that decision support query, then the event latency is actually that many minutes. All right? So latency right now is for events that are entered by humans is mediated by the quality of the human performer, which is why we would actually like to use machine data, like the lack of blood pressure, rather than human entered data. But in fact, we depend on a lot of human entered data. And so I've hypothesized, but not really been able to test, that ergonomics does impact latency. And if you don't document something, the latency is infinite. So it seems like a matter of preference whether or not you do something like put the anesthesia information management system on the right side of the anesthesia machine or on the left side of the anesthesia machine. But, or in this case, if you put it on the left, you can actually have the head of the patient there and the anesthetist documenting while they're facing the bed. Okay, it's the question of, would you like to have your back turned to the scene of action, or would you like to be facing the scene of the action while you document? And since latency does matter and we need high quality documentation, we would like to actually have the anesthesiologist in the field and also able to document. We would like it to look like this. This patient, by the way, gave consent to have identifiable images shown. So I'm actually intubating this patient. There's a medical student looking around trying to see if they can see too. And so in goes the endotracheal tube. There's the monitor up there. Notice that there's no blood pressure. Oh, actually there is, I'm sorry. So that's just going to be too good. And that's the AIMS interface right there. That's the medical record keeping system. All right. So I just ventilated the patient, so I'm confident that they're intubated. Air's going in and out. Air's more important than blood, by the way. So in just a second, right after, so documenting, okay? So within seconds of accomplishing the intubation, I'm documenting what the intubation was like. Now, of course, I'd like not to have to document. That would be the very best. I'd like it if just, magically it happened. But I think that that's maybe a 10-year pipe dream. So we face, again, also this, do we want structured data or free text, okay? I would argue that in this environment, structured data is what we can get. And it's also really useful. So it's really quite possible to create a nice note just from scripted pick lists.
Or wouldn't it be helpful here if you had a Vocera equipment and you could just say intubated, done, and then...
Yeah, but what's that? But I can also have a one-click checkbox that says intubated. It just puts a timestamp in, right? Yeah, it would be convenient. You know how reliable Vocera is right now?
No idea.
I'm almost out of time. I'm gonna push ahead. This does matter. What happens in the operating room does matter. Anesthesiologists have spent 100 years trying to persuade the world of the Las Vegas theory to anesthesia. What happens in the operating room stays in the operating room. Oh, thank you. All right, let's see. Let me get that back.
Your time is up.
So what happens in the operating room stays in the operating room, right? It's all meant to be reversible. You're going to be fine. Our clean kill rate's 1 in 100,000. That's what you hear, right? But it's not true. So Jesse and his colleagues at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and again at Vanderbilt developed something called the surgical APGAR score, which is basically a numerical score where you get points of what the estimated blood loss was. Higher gets you fewer points and is bad. The lowest mean arterial pressure measured during the case, and the lowest heart rate, where high heart rates are bad, okay? So if you spend the entire case with your, what's going on with my computer, the fan is really going fast. So where if your lowest heart rate never gets below 80, that's bad, okay? So just to reemphasize, so this person would have had a surgical APGAR score of 7, which is actually pretty fair. So low is bad, okay? In fact, using a training set of about 4,900 patients, if you had a surgical APGAR score of 0 or 2, and there were only 16 patients like that in the sample, you had a 40% chance of dying and an 80% chance of either dying or having a major complication, okay? And we can actually see these trajectories develop. This is the early part of the operation where a lot of stuff is going on and it's difficult to actually, patients are moving up and down and sort of assorting themselves. But basically, most patients over the course of time, where this is from the beginning of the operation to the end as a percentage of the total time, they sort of stay up here above, right around 7, okay? Those are the patients without complications, okay? Patients with complications show us a different pattern, okay? They start off at a 7 and then they deteriorate. And we think we can actually display that information. Hey, your patient just crossed the threshold from 7 to 6. Maybe time to start thinking about whether you should just send this patient to the recovery room or if we should throw in the towel early and send them to the intensive care unit. So we're actually paying attention to this at the national level. Not only am I inviting you to come play in the operating room, I want to expose to you some of the big questions in anesthesiology and some approaches that we're taking to answering those questions. So there is something called the Multi-Center Perioperative Outcomes Group, which is housed at the University of Michigan, but which the Department of Anesthesiology at Vanderbilt is a member. And right now, there are 1 million cases that have been de-identified and linked to real outcomes data from the National Surgical Quality Improvement Project. And the price of admission to troll the MPOG database is you've got to convince an anesthesia department at your institution to join and contribute 10,000 cases. It's free, all right? So we've got 1 million cases, 7 institutions. These are the ones that are active. Vanderbilt's coming online soon, and these are the ones that are playing. And this is also true in critical care. where the U.S. Critical Care Illness and Injury Trials Group they started off with the UCIT IWD-DSB, but they changed it to the name to MAGIC. And again, those cases are available. You just have to join the group. All right. So I just wanted to stop, having given you this grand tour of the operating room and the problem space, and thank some collaborators. We actually have done a lot of work in this area and made some serious headway at improving the performance of the clinicians in the environment. And unlike many quality improvement projects, especially in the perioperative space, we've published these. So I would encourage any of you in this room who would like to engage with us to come. You'll find an active environment that's welcoming and very sharing. Vanderbilt is an incredibly collaborative place, and the only thing that irritates me about the job that I have now is that because we own our own systems, we can't really readily propagate this. Most of what we do at Vanderbilt, you can't bolt on to your vendor AIMS or your vendor EHR at the institution you're at. So we have to settle for basically showing the vendors where they need to go. Thank you. Yes?
For the hospital A where you implemented the alert system, why was there still that 1.2%? They were getting the beat.
It's a separate talk, but basically we were able to improve the performance of the nurse anesthetists who are used to taking orders. We were not able to improve the performance of the attending anesthesiologists who are exceptional and reserve the right to be an exception. We were only halfway able to improve the performance of the residents who were in the thrall of the attending anesthesiologists and being trained to be exceptional. No joke. We were assaulted in the hallway by faculty at this place with comments to the tune of, "I'm a doctor. I don't need these kinds of reminders. You're just irritating me." So this is the cultural problem that you face in healthcare. And until people who are my age and older are dead and buried and are replaced by people who are your age and Jesse's age, this will be a problem. It's the same thing of, I don't want to document. I'm too busy to write this down. If you don't actually write down what happened, did it happen? And is it available for somebody else to help? Your hand up first.
I really enjoyed that talk. I think it's going to be really useful to learn from that kind of environment. The question that I have is, with the blood pressure alerts, why didn't you just automate the blood pressure recording at the beginning of the procedure as soon as you...
Well, you have to remember to put the cuff on, right?
Okay. But you had it on at the beginning of production.
Sometimes. I can tell you that there are groups of anesthesiologists who routinely induce a blood without monitors, and in some institutions they will induce anesthetics in adult patients with IVs without monitors. So there's always an exception. So anything that, so just when you're thinking to yourself, if they just remember to, if you have to say that, it won't. So because people are not trainable. Not as trainable as they need to be. So there is a more meaningful reason why not. And that is that an automated blood pressure cuff that inflates on the arm works by stopping the flow of blood through the arm. And if you blow it up and it just stays stuck there, eventually the arm will die. And if that's the patient's dominant hand, that's a $1 million injury. So these devices are intended to fail safe. They don't start automatically. And if they fail to take a blood pressure and then they don't restart, most of them don't restart automatically either, because they can fail in the fully inflated and just stuck there mode. So the bottom line, everything we do in healthcare has a risk, and you can't make it perfect. So I think what we need to do is what we do as anesthesiologists, okay, which is we don't actually not make mistakes. We notice them and we mitigate their effects as quickly as possible. I don't tell a patient I'm not going to make any mistakes. What I tell a patient is if there are things that are, if there are unusual events in the operating room, I have the education background and the resources to monitor those things. And you don't want an
doctors is alarmed, but I think one of the reasons why it was possibly successful is that you're using a modality that they're not currently using a lot of. So the vibration is pretty
So if we
little.
taste the crap out of them, they just take their pages and throw them away. That's a risk. We've actually paid attention to paper traffic, and it's not as high as you might worry about. And because they learn, you can actually then suppress an alert, turn it off, and don't turn it back on until performance decays. That gives you a variable reinforcement scheme. It's the very best of all for animal training. Thanks.
So the next talk is by Pete Sullivan. So Pete is a professor at MIT and also at Harvard at HST. Pete's been working in applying or developing AI ideas for various applications in medicine for a very, very, very long time in almost every application you can think about. But the easiest way to say this is if you're in Boston and you go ask any doctor who Pete Sullivan is, they all know who Pete is. They may not know the person who is, 3 offices down, but they'll know who Pete is. So thanks, Pete, for coming and giving us this talk.